Victor won the check for $74 million was still warm from the bank printer when Victor Hale told his pregnant wife to leave his house. Natalie Vale stood in the marble foyer with one hand pressed beneath her ribs, where the baby had begun to move whenever voices rose. Rain glittered against the tall glass doors behind her. Her suitcase was at her feet because Victor's assistant had packed it before Natalie even came home from her doctor's appointment. Victor did not look like a man ending a marriage. He looked like a man admiring a clean desk. His dark suit had no wrinkle. His silver watch flashed each time he turned the check between his fingers, and his mouth held the faint, satisfied curve Natalie had once mistaken for confidence. "You should be grateful," he said. "Most women in your position would get nothing." Beside him, Marissa Crane crossed one long leg over the other on the ivory bench near the staircase. She wore Natalie's emerald silk scarf around her throat. The scarf had been a birthday gift from Natalie's late grandfather, but Marissa touched it as if it were a trophy won in a private war. "Victor, don't be cruel," Marissa murmured, though her eyes were bright with enjoyment. "She's pregnant. She needs somewhere modest and quiet." Natalie looked from the scarf to Victor's face. 5 years of marriage had taught her every polished corner of him. The way his jaw tightened when he lied. The way he watched a room for witnesses before becoming kind. The way he enjoyed humiliation more when he could pretend it was business. "The house is mine," Natalie said quietly. Victor laughed once, short and sharp. "The house was purchased through Hale Residential Holdings. My company. My accounts. My lawyers. You signed what I put in front of you because you never understood money." Natalie felt the baby shift again. Not a kick this time. More like a warning from a tiny person already tired of listening to fools. On the console table lay the documents Victor had arranged for her. A separation agreement. A confidentiality clause. A demand that she vacate by midnight. A waiver of any claim to the $74 million settlement Hale Group had received that morning from its failed lawsuit against a supplier. That settlement was the reason for the performance. 3 months earlier, Victor had been pale and sleepless, pacing the bedroom at 2 a.m. because his company was drowning in debt. Natalie had offered help through a quiet family office she never named. Victor had refused when he believed the money came from her. Then he accepted when the offer returned through a private credit fund with an elegant logo and no visible connection to his wife. That fund had kept Hale Group alive long enough for the lawsuit to settle. Now Victor had the $74 million, and he wanted to erase the woman he thought had merely stood beside him. "I am 7 months pregnant," Natalie said. "You had your assistant pack my medication into a side pocket without checking the dosage. You changed the locks before I got home. Does your lawyer know you did that?" Victor's smile thinned. "My lawyer drafted the papers." "Did he draft the part where your mistress wears my scarf in my foyer?" Marissa's cheeks flushed, but only for a second. She leaned back, lifted her chin, and smiled as if the word mistress were too small for her. "Exhaustion makes women dramatic," Marissa said, "especially when they have spent years pretending to be above everyone." Natalie did not answer her. She watched Victor, because in any betrayal there was a central coward, and all surrounding cruelty was decoration. "You can keep the old Volvo," Victor said. "I left the keys in your purse. I am not heartless." The old Volvo had belonged to Natalie's grandmother. Victor had laughed at it for years, calling it a charity case with wheels. He did not know the car was registered to a trust that owned half the street beneath his flagship office tower. Natalie bent slowly and picked up the separation agreement. The baby made her balance strange, and Victor did not move to help. Marissa watched as if hoping Natalie would stumble. The first page named her Natalie and Hale. That was the second mistake. Her legal name had never been Hale. In every serious document, she was Natalie Arden Vale, beneficiary and controlling steward of the Vale Ellison Consortium, a $36 billion private fortune built from logistics, medical infrastructure, ports, patents, and land Victor had walked across without once asking who owned the ground. Hale was the name she used at charity breakfasts and school board dinners. Hale was the name Victor liked because it made him feel like he had absorbed her. But paper remembered what men forgot. Natalie set the agreement back down. Her fingers were steady now. "I won't sign this." Victor's face hardened. "Then I will make the next offer uglier." "No," Natalie said. "You will make the next mistake uglier." For the first time, something uncertain moved behind his eyes. It vanished quickly. Men like Victor did not fear cliffs until the ground had already disappeared. Marissa stood, her heels clicking against marble. "Victor, she is trying to scare you. She has nowhere to go." Natalie looked at the woman wearing her scarf. Marissa was beautiful in a deliberate, expensive way. Golden hair smooth as poured champagne, lips painted the color of fresh cherries, diamond studs large enough to be seen from across a courtroom. Her beauty had the brittle shine of rented confidence. "Take it off," Natalie said. Marissa blinked. "Excuse me?" "The scarf." Victor stepped between them. "Enough. You don't give orders here anymore." Natalie glanced around the foyer. The Italian marble had been selected by her grandmother. The chandelier had been restored by a craftsman paid through a Vail foundation. The portrait over the fireplace was a loan from a private collection, whose owner sent Natalie holiday cards every December. She gave a small, tired smile. "Victor, I never needed to give orders here." Her phone vibrated in her coat pocket. One message appeared on the screen from Eleanor Price, her chief counsel. "Are you safe?" Natalie typed with one thumb. "For now. Begin with the house." The reply came before Victor finished his next sentence. "Done." Outside, beyond the rain-streaked glass, two black cars rolled silently through the gate. Victor noticed the headlights and frowned. "Who is that?" Natalie picked up her suitcase, then paused because even now she would not let him believe she was running. "Someone who reads documents before signing them." The doorbell rang through the house like he had paid for them. His frown deepened as the house manager hurried across the foyer, confused because Victor had already dismissed most of the staff for the evening. The older woman opened the door, and rain-cooled air swept inside with three visitors. Eleanor Price entered first, silver-haired, narrow-eyed, and dressed in a charcoal coat that looked more judicial than fashionable. Behind her came Marcus Flint, head of Vail Private Security, a broad man with a calm face and hands folded in front of him. The third visitor was a city marshal holding an envelope protected beneath his raincoat. Victor's gaze moved over them with irritated suspicion. "This is private property," he said. Eleanor removed her gloves finger by finger. "Yes, that is why we are here." Natalie saw the exact moment Victor recognized the type of woman he could not charm. Eleanor did not perform intimidation. She simply occupied space as if nonsense were a stain she had no intention of stepping in. "And you are?" Victor demanded. "Eleanor Price, counsel for Arden Vale Holdings and several associated entities." She looked at Natalie, and her expression softened by one precise degree. "Mrs. Vale, are you injured?" Victor's eyes snapped toward his wife. "Mrs. what?" Natalie did not answer. She felt the baby's small pressure under her palm and focused on breathing evenly. Conflict could make a room feel hot, but panic had never helped a woman win. The marshal stepped forward. "Victor Hale." "This is absurd," Victor said. "Whatever this is, you can speak to my attorney." "You have been served." The marshal handed him the envelope. Victor took it because people like him always took paper. Paper had made him rich. Paper had hidden his affair. Paper, he believed, could be made to obey him. Eleanor spoke while he opened it. "Effective immediately, the property at 114 Briarhouse Lane is under enforcement notice due to fraudulent occupancy declarations and unauthorized lock changes against the controlling owner." Marissa's hand went to the scarf at her throat. Victor stared at the document. "Controlling owner?" "Arden Vale Holdings," Eleanor said. "Mrs. Vale's family office acquired the property 9 years before your marriage through Briar Lane Preservation Trust. Hale Residential Holdings has never owned the residence. Your name does not appear on the deed, the trust schedule, or the insurance policy." The silence that followed had weight. Victor looked at Natalie as if she had changed height in front of him. "You told me this house was complicated." "It was," Natalie said. "You stopped listening after you heard you could host clients here." Marissa stepped closer to Victor. The movement was small, but Natalie noticed it. Marissa had believed she was standing beside a castle. Now she had heard the foundation crack, and her body had chosen shelter before pride could object. Victor recovered enough to sneer. "Fine. She owns the house. Let her keep it. I have $74 million and a company to run." Eleanor's eyes did not move. "The $74 million is also under review." Victor's face went still. That was the first real payment of the night. Eleanor opened a slim folder. Hale Group received emergency bridge financing through Northbridge Medical Infrastructure Fund. The loan covenants required disclosure of material domestic litigation, asset transfers above $2 million, and executive conduct that could affect company valuation. Your attempt to remove Mrs. Vale from her home, coerce a separation agreement, and conceal personal expenditures tied to Ms. Crane may trigger immediate audit rights. Marissa's voice sharpened. Personal expenditures? Natalie looked at her. Did you think the penthouse lease, the jewelry, and the Capri trip were paid from Victor's personal account? Marissa's mouth opened, then closed. The scarf trembled slightly at her throat. Victor crushed the envelope in one fist. You have been spying on me. No, Natalie said. You submitted reimbursement requests to a company with accountants. Marcus Flint gave a quiet cough that might have been amusement if he were a less disciplined man. Victor pointed at Eleanor. Get out of my house. Eleanor glanced around the foyer. Again, not your house. The sentence landed with the clean satisfaction of a door shutting. Natalie should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt suddenly tired. Her back ached. The baby pressed downward. The man in front of her had once sat on the bathroom floor at 2 a.m, holding her hair, while morning sickness broke her open. Had that man been real? Or had he only been patient while he believed she was useful? Victor stepped toward her. Marcus moved half a pace. That was enough. Victor stopped. What do you want? He asked, and his voice had lost its polish. Natalie lifted her eyes to his. Tonight? My medication. My grandmother's scarf. And for you to leave this property. Marissa made a soft sound of outrage. You cannot throw us out in the rain. You were comfortable throwing out a pregnant woman at 7 months, Natalie said. Color rose high in Marissa's cheeks. She reached for the scarf, then hesitated, as if removing it would admit defeat. Natalie waited. So did everyone else. At last Marissa untied it with stiff fingers and placed it on the console table. Natalie did not touch it. Some things needed cleaning before they could come home. Victor looked at the security men visible beyond the open door. You planned this? No, Natalie said. You did. I only answered. Eleanor stepped beside her. Mrs. Vale, your car is ready. Victor's eyes narrowed at that name. Vale. As in Vale Ellison? Natalie watched recognition crawl through him piece by piece. Vale Ports. Vale Hospitals. Vale Logistics. Vale Patents. A family so private that business magazines used old photographs and cautious verbs. A fortune people in his circles spoke of the way sailors once spoke of storms, with greed and fear mixed together. Marissa whispered, Victor? He did not look at her. For 5 years, Natalie had seen him dismiss her old clothes, her quiet schedule, her refusal to appear on society pages. He had called her simple. He had called her safe. He had never imagined safety could be a locked vault with his name outside it. Natalie picked up her suitcase again. You have 30 minutes, Eleanor told Victor. Anything belonging to Mrs. Vale or the residence stays. Victor's lips parted, but no command came out. As Natalie stepped into the rain, Marcus opened an umbrella over her. Behind her, the foyer glowed gold and white, a beautiful stage where the wrong actor had just forgotten his lines. She did not look back until she reached the car. Victor stood in the doorway holding the served papers. Marissa stood behind him without the scarf, suddenly ordinary in the borrowed light. The baby kicked once, hard. Natalie rested her palm over the movement. I know, she did not go to a hotel. Victor would have expected a hotel. He would have called managers he knew, charmed concierge desks, searched for her name on reservation lists, and told himself that locating her meant controlling the story. He understood public rooms. He did not understand private networks. Marcus drove through the rain to a limestone townhouse in the West End, a quiet property with no visible nameplate and a garden hidden behind black iron gates. The house belonged to the Vale Ellison Consortium, though on city records it appeared under a boring maintenance trust that no gossip columnist had ever found interesting. Inside, warm lamplight touched old wood floors. A nurse named Dana waited in the hall with a medical bag. Eleanor had arranged everything in less than 20 minutes because powerful women did not need panic when they had systems. Blood pressure first, Dana said gently. Natalie sat on a cream sofa while the cuff tightened around her arm. Her hands began to shake only after the door closed behind Marcus. It annoyed her, not because fear was shameful, but because Victor would have enjoyed seeing it. Dana noticed and said nothing. She simply put a glass of water within reach. Eleanor stood by the fireplace scrolling through updates on her tablet. Security changed the Briar House access codes. Inventory team arrives at 8 in the morning. Victor and Ms. Crane left at 11:16 p.m. after attempting to remove 2 suitcases, 3 pieces of artwork, and a wine collection that never belonged to him. Natalie looked up. He tried to take the Turner sketch? He claimed it was a gift from a client. It was loaned by my aunt. Marcus was firm. Despite everything, Natalie almost laughed. The sound came out thin and brief, but it loosened something in her chest. Dana removed the cuff. Your pressure is elevated, but not dangerous. The baby sounds strong. You need rest, food, and no more confrontations tonight. Natalie wanted to obey. Her body wanted it more. But her mind had begun arranging facts, and facts did not sleep simply because the heart was bruised. I need the covenant files, she said. Eleanor looked over her glasses. You need soup. I need both. Soup first. That was the closest Eleanor came to tenderness. Natalie accepted it. While Dana warmed food in the kitchen, Natalie opened the tablet Eleanor handed her and reviewed the timeline. Victor had received confirmation of the $74 million settlement at 9:12 a.m. At 9:31 a.m., he had emailed his attorney asking for immediate domestic cleanup. At 10:04 a.m., Marissa had posted a private story from a jewelry boutique with the caption, New Life, New Rules. At 2:17 p.m., Victor had ordered the house locks changed. At 4:40 p.m., his assistant had packed Natalie's suitcase. At 5:05 p.m., Natalie had been listening to her obstetrician explain fetal hiccups. She stared at that timestamp longer than the others. Eleanor's voice lowered. There is more. Natalie looked up. Victor scheduled a board call for tomorrow at 9. Agenda says settlement allocation, leadership continuity, and family office debt retirement. He plans to announce that Hale Group is fully independent and repay Northbridge early. With the settlement. Yes. Can he? Technically, if he cures the debt and no default is declared before transfer, he can reduce our leverage. That is why tonight matters. Natalie set the tablet on her lap. Victor was not only cruel. He was moving fast. If he repaid the bridge loan before the audit trigger was invoked, he could frame everything as a private marital dispute and keep the company intact long enough to move assets. Marissa had not been the reason for his hurry. She had been the reward. Prepare the notice of potential default, Natalie said. Send it at 8:30. Not before. Eleanor's brow lifted. Why wait? Because I want him on the board call when it lands. For the first time that night, Eleanor smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was better. Natalie leaned back, feeling the baby's steady presence under her ribs. She had hidden her family name from Victor at the beginning, because she wanted to know whether he could love an ordinary woman. Later, she hid it because admitting the truth felt like confessing she had built a marriage on an experiment she was ashamed of. She had told herself privacy protected them both. Now she understood privacy had protected only him. Her phone buzzed. Victor. She let it ring. It stopped, then began again. Eleanor watched her. You do not have to answer. I know. Natalie accepted the call on speaker. Victor's voice came sharp and breathless. What the hell are you doing? Resting. Do you think this is funny? No. You humiliated me in my own home. Natalie closed her eyes for 1 second. Victor, you threw your pregnant wife out after receiving money that exists because my fund saved your company. Humiliation is not what happened to you. Humiliation is what you attempted and failed to complete. There was silence. Then his voice dropped. How much of it is yours? No apology. No concern. No question about the baby. Only measurement. Natalie opened her eyes. Good night, Victor. Natalie, don't you dare hang up. We can discuss this like adults. I was angry. Marissa pushed. The lawyers were aggressive. You know how these things become bigger than they are. Eleanor's expression did not change, but her eyes sharpened. Natalie understood then that Victor had moved from command to negotiation. The speed of it was almost insulting. You changed the locks, Natalie said. A mistake. You packed my medication. I did not supervise that. You let another woman wear my grandfather's gift. It was a scarf. There it was. The smallest sentence, somehow worse than all the large betrayals. Natalie's hand stilled over her belly. No, she said. It was a warning, and I finally heard it. She ended the call. The townhouse became quiet except for rain and the faint sound of Dana setting a bowl on a tray. Natalie looked at Eleanor. Tomorrow he loses the story. And after that? Natalie touched the place where the baby had gone still, perhaps soothed by the return of silence. After the 9 o'clock board call, with a smile broad enough to hide a battlefield. He sat at the head of the conference table on the 32nd floor of Hale Tower, framed by a wall of glass and a city washed clean by last night's rain. He had chosen the navy suit Natalie used to like, the one that made investors call him disciplined and journalists call him self-made. On the table before him lay the settlement summary, a repayment schedule, and a press statement describing Hale Group's triumphant return to strength. Triumphant was Victor's favorite word when someone else had paid the price. Around the table sat 6 directors, 2 senior executives, and his general counsel, Peter Lang, who had the bloodless complexion of a man paid to make bad ideas sound inevitable. Marissa was not supposed to attend, but she hovered in the adjacent glass office, wearing cream cashmere and diamonds she had no reason to own at 9 in the morning. Victor liked seeing her there. She reminded him what victory was for. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "yesterday Hale Group reached a $74 million settlement that changes our immediate future. I propose we use a portion to retire the Northbridge facility ahead of schedule, restore market confidence, and move forward without restrictive oversight." Board member Claudia Reyes frowned. "Ahead of schedule? We have pending expansion obligations." "Expansion requires independence," Victor said smoothly. "Northbridge served its purpose. Now we remove the leash." Peter Lang nodded. "The facility allows early repayment." "Then let's vote," Victor said. His phone lit up beside the folder. An email banner appeared. Notice of potential default and preservation demand. Victor's smile did not move, but his eyes did. Another phone chimed. Then another. Around the table, directors glanced down. Peter Lang opened the email first. His face changed so subtly most people would have missed it. Victor did not. Lawyers looked calm when things were expensive. Peter looked calm when things were fatal. "Peter?" Claudia said. Victor kept his voice light. "Probably administrative noise from Northbridge." Claudia read from her screen. "This notice cites executive misconduct, undisclosed related party benefits, coercive domestic conduct involving a protected family member, misuse of company resources, and attempted asset transfers." The room cooled. Victor's hand closed around his pen. "This is a personal matter being exaggerated." Another director, Owen Bell, scrolled rapidly. "They are demanding preservation of all emails, expense records, travel records, security footage, and communications with Marissa Crane." Marissa's head lifted behind the glass. Claudia looked toward the office. "Why is Ms. Crane here?" Victor's jaw tightened. "She is a consultant on brand partnerships." "Since when?" Owen asked. "Since I hired her." "Through what approval process?" Victor's pen snapped between his fingers. It was a small sound, but everyone heard it. Peter cleared his throat. "We should pause before any vote." "No," Victor said. "We will not let a lender interfere with leadership decisions because my wife is angry." Claudia's eyes sharpened. "Your wife is connected to Northbridge?" Victor did not answer quickly enough. In boardrooms, a delayed answer often carries more truth than a confession. The conference room door opened. Eleanor Price walked in with a younger attorney and a court reporter. Behind them came Natalie. She wore a black maternity dress beneath a camel coat, her hair pinned low at her neck, her face pale but composed. There was no jewelry on her except a thin gold band on her right hand, an old family ring she had stopped wearing after Victor said it looked unfashionable. Every person at the table stood except Victor. Natalie noticed. So did everyone else. "This is a closed meeting," Victor said. Eleanor placed a folder on the table. "Not to the controlling creditor exercising audit rights." Peter Lang stood halfway. "We have not acknowledged default." "You do not need to acknowledge gravity for it to function," Eleanor said. Owen Bell coughed into his fist. Natalie remained near the door. She did not take a seat. Her presence unsettled Victor more than an argument would have. He had prepared for tears, accusations, perhaps threats. He had not prepared for stillness. Claudia looked from Natalie to Victor. "Mrs. Hale, are you representing Northbridge?" Victor almost smiled at the mistaken name, perhaps hoping the error would shrink her. Natalie answered before he could. "My name is Natalie Arden Vale. I am the controlling steward of the Vale Ellison Consortium, which owns the majority interest in Northbridge Medical Infrastructure Fund." No one moved. Outside the glass walls, the city continued without mercy. Claudia sat down slowly. Owen whispered something that sounded like a prayer. Peter Lang looked at Victor with the exhausted resentment of a lawyer whose client had hidden the one fact that mattered. Marissa opened the glass office door. "Victor, what is she talking about?" Natalie finally looked at her. "The money." Marissa's lips parted. Victor stood. "This is theater." "No," Natalie said. "Theater was last night. This is governance." Eleanor distributed documents. "For the record, Mrs. Vale is not here to manage a domestic dispute. She is here because company resources appear to have been used for undisclosed benefits to Ms. Crane, because executive judgment has been materially compromised, and because Mr. Hale attempted to use a settlement funded by creditor support to exit oversight while concealing relevant conduct. Victor leaned forward on both hands. Natalie, stop this. The word this carried everything he did not want named. Stop the audit. Stop the exposure. Stop being someone larger than the woman I could dismiss. Natalie met his eyes. Yesterday you told me most women in my position would get nothing. The room held its breath. Today I am here to determine whether your company still gets anything. That was when Victor finally understood the $74 million had never been the end of his crisis. The Crane had imagined many versions of this morning. In the best version, Victor announced a clean future, signed something impressive, and took her to lunch where people noticed the diamonds at her ears. In another, Natalie cried on the phone, and Victor looked burdened but relieved. In every version, Marissa became the woman chosen after the dull wife failed to hold a powerful man. None of her versions included standing behind glass, while that wife introduced herself as a $36 billion problem. Marissa gripped the door handle until her knuckles paled. The board members no longer looked at her as a beautiful disruption. They looked at her as evidence. Evidence had a way of making beauty feel cheap. Victor turned toward Natalie, lowering his voice as if intimacy could be used like a curtain. Can we speak privately? No, Natalie said. You owe me that. Her expression did not change, but something in the room flinched on her behalf. I owe our child a record of what happened, she said. I owe myself the dignity of not hiding your choices. Claudia Reyes folded her hands. She had served on boards long enough to know when silence became complicity. Mr. Hale, before this continues, did you authorize company funds for Ms. Crane's travel, residence, or jewelry? Victor looked at Peter Lang. Peter looked at the table. Marissa's stomach tightened. Brand development expenses, Victor said. Preliminary partnership work. Natalie opened one of the folders. Capri, Monaco, Aspen. A penthouse lease under Cresswell Hospitality. 12 invoices from a personal stylist. 2 diamond purchases routed through client entertainment. Ms. Crane's brand development appears to require very little brand and extensive development. Owen Bell made the mistake of almost smiling. He corrected his face quickly. Marissa stepped into the room. I worked for those opportunities. I attended meetings. Eleanor turned a page. You attended one meeting in Monaco. It lasted 40 minutes. The invoice submitted afterward included a 6-night suite, 2 spa treatments, and a private yacht deposit. Marissa's face burned. I did not submit invoices. Victor did, Natalie said. Marissa looked at him. There are moments when betrayal changes direction in a room. Natalie saw it happen. Marissa had thought Victor was generous because he adored her. Now she understood he had used company paperwork to buy her, then planned to call her a consultant when the bill came due. Victor felt the shift and hated it. Do not look at me like that, he snapped at Marissa. You enjoyed every second. The room became very still. Marissa stepped back as if he had slapped her. Her smugness cracked, and beneath it Natalie saw something young and frightened. Not innocent, not harmless, but frightened. Natalie did not pity her enough to forget what she had done. She pitied her enough to know Victor had made her disposable too. Claudia looked at Peter. Counsel, does the board have authority to appoint an independent committee? Peter swallowed. Yes. Victor rounded on her. You are not serious. I am very serious, Claudia said. The creditor has demanded preservation. Our CEO is implicated. We need independent review before any settlement allocation. This company has my name on it. Natalie spoke softly. That is becoming one of its liabilities. Victor's face darkened. Careful. Marcus, waiting outside the room, shifted into view through the glass. Natalie did not glance back. She did not need to. Owen Bell leaned forward. Mr. Hale, did you ask Mrs. Vale to sign away claims to the settlement last night? Victor's silence returned. Eleanor slid a copy of the separation agreement across the table. This document was presented to Mrs. Vale at approximately 7:30 p.m. after her access to her residence had been interfered with and her personal medication packed by Mr. Hale's staff. Claudia read the first page. It names her incorrectly. Among other defects, Eleanor said. Peter closed his eyes for 1 second. Victor jabbed a finger toward Natalie. She hid who she was. For 5 years she lied. That accusation finally touched something raw. Natalie looked at him for a long moment. Her voice stayed even, but the room felt the restraint inside it. I told you I had family assets. I told you I used my own counsel. I told you not to build your pride on assumptions. You heard old money and decided it meant a few trusts and a vacation house. You heard privacy and decided it meant weakness. That was not my lie, Victor. That was your appetite. Claudia's face softened briefly, then hardened again into business. Victor laughed, but there was no humor left in him. So what happens now? You take my company because I hurt your feelings? No, Natalie said. If Hale Group survives, it will be because the employees, vendors, and patients depending on your infrastructure deserve better than your feelings. That mattered. Hale Group was not merely a vanity company. Its divisions supplied hospital equipment, rural clinic systems, and emergency transport software. Victor had built parts of it well before ambition curdled into entitlement. Natalie would not burn thousands of livelihoods just to warm her hands at his downfall. But she would not allow him to hide behind those livelihoods either. Eleanor addressed the board. Northbridge is prepared to forbear from immediate acceleration if the board forms an independent committee, freezes discretionary executive compensation, preserves the settlement funds in escrow, and places Mr. Hale on administrative leave pending review. Victor stared. Administrative leave? Claudia looked around the table. One by one, directors avoided Victor's eyes. That was how power left him. Not with shouting. With people deciding he was no longer the safest place to stand. All in favor of forming the committee and accepting interim conditions? Claudia asked. Hands rose. Not all at once. That would have been merciful. They rose one by one while Victor watched. Marissa stood by the glass door, diamonds trembling at her ears. Natalie felt no joy exactly. Joy belonged to cleaner victories. This was something heavier, a necessary correction made in front of witnesses. Victor's chair scraped back. You think this is over? He said. Natalie gathered her folder. No. I think this is final. The story had begun to leak. It did not break all at once. It seeped through private text chains, investor calls, executive assistants, and one junior analyst who posted the phrase Hale Board Emergency on an industry forum before deleting it too late. By 3, 2 business reporters were calling Hale Group's communications office. By 4, Victor's photograph had vanished from the company's homepage carousel. Natalie spent the afternoon at the townhouse with Dana nearby, Eleanor on video calls, and a cup of ginger tea cooling untouched beside her. She reviewed documents while pretending not to feel each wave of emotion. Anger was simple. Betrayal was not. Betrayal had rooms inside it. One room held Victor teaching her to make risotto badly on their 2nd anniversary, both of them laughing at the smoke alarm. Another held him last night, telling her most women would get nothing. She could not yet reconcile those rooms. Perhaps she never would. At 5:20, Eleanor ended a call and looked up. Victor retained crisis counsel. Good, Natalie said. Maybe someone will advise him to stop speaking. He did not. Natalie closed her eyes. Eleanor turned the tablet toward her. A statement had been sent from Victor's personal media contact to 3 journalists. It described him as the victim of a calculated deception by a spouse who concealed extreme wealth while positioning herself to seize a company after a private marital conflict. Natalie read it twice. The first time as a wife. The second time as the woman who would answer. He is calling me a predator, she said. Yes. While I am pregnant with his child. Also yes. Dana appeared in the doorway. Blood pressure. Natalie almost protested, but Dana's face allowed no negotiation. She submitted to the cuff while Eleanor waited. The numbers were high again. Dana frowned. You need a break. Natalie looked at the statement. Victor had always understood optics. He knew a hidden fortune could be framed as manipulation. He knew some people would resent a woman with money more than a man who used it. He knew pregnancy made her sympathetic, so he would recast himself as trapped. He was not clever enough to win, but he was cruel enough to wound. We answer once, Natalie said. No emotion. Timeline, documents, child safety, governance. Then nothing. Eleanor nodded. Already drafted. Of course she had. The response went out at 6. It did not mention Marissa by insult, only by documented role. It did not call Victor abusive, only described actions, lock changes, packed medication, attempted coerced agreement, undisclosed expenses, audit triggers. It confirmed Natalie Arden-Vale's identity and stated her priority was protecting her child, lawful process, and the employees whose work should not be jeopardized by executive misconduct. At 6:15, the first reporter wrote, Victor Hale's accusation may have backfired. At 6:20, someone posted a photo of Marissa entering the Hale Tower that morning with the caption, Brand Development? At 6:30, Marissa called Natalie. Eleanor saw the name and raised an eyebrow. Natalie stared at the screen. Put it through. Marissa's voice came without its usual velvet. I did not know about the medication. Natalie said nothing. I did not know he changed the locks before you came home from the doctor. But you knew he was married. A quiet breath crossed the line. Yes. The honesty surprised Natalie more than any excuse would have. Marissa continued. He told me you had an arrangement. That you stayed married for appearances. That the baby was complicated. The word landed cold. Natalie looked toward the window where evening pressed blue against the glass. What did he say about the baby? Marissa was silent too long. Tell me, Natalie said. He said he was not sure it was his. For a moment the room narrowed to a point. Dana stepped closer, seeing Natalie's face change. Victor had not only betrayed her. He had prepared a story for the child. A shadow waiting before birth. Natalie inhaled slowly. Her hands wanted to shake, so she folded them. Why are you calling me? Marissa's voice broke around pride. Because he just told his lawyers I handled the invoices. He said I demanded the purchases. He said I manipulated him. Natalie was not surprised. That made it uglier. Did you? I liked the gifts, Marissa said, quieter now. I liked being chosen. I was stupid and vain and cruel to you. But I did not steal from his company. Natalie believed the last sentence. Not because Marissa deserved belief, but because Victor's pattern was already visible. He distributed blame the way he distributed affection, only when it benefited him. Preserve everything, Natalie said. Messages, emails, receipts, voice notes. Do not meet him alone. Get your own lawyer. Marissa sounded startled. You are helping me? No. I am helping the truth stay intact. There was a small, ragged laugh. You really are not what he said. Natalie's mouth tightened. Neither is he. After the call ended, Dana checked the baby's heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. Natalie listened with one hand over her eyes. Eleanor waited until the monitor was put away. Do you want to add the paternity smear to the record? Natalie thought of her child one day reading headlines, old statements, court filings. The instinct to protect rose like fire. Not publicly, she said. Not unless he forces it. My baby is not a weapon. Eleanor nodded, approval flickering beneath her professional calm. That night, Natalie slept badly. She dreamed of doors locking and unlocked them one by one until she woke before dawn with a clear thought. Victor had taken her silence as emptiness. Now he would learn silence could be storage. Emails are dangerous because people write them while believing tomorrow will be kind. Victor's inbox was a museum of confidence. He had directed assistants to categorize Marissa's travel under client development. He had asked finance to smooth out jewelry receipts. He had told Peter Lang that Natalie's signature would be easy because she did not like conflict. That line made Eleanor pause. Natalie read it without expression. She did not like conflict. That part was true. What Victor failed to understand was that disliking conflict had made her patient, observant, and difficult to provoke into mistakes. By the third day, the review had enough to freeze Victor's access to company discretionary accounts. By the fourth, the board extended his leave. By the fifth, 3 creditors besides Northbridge requested briefings. Victor responded by arriving at the townhouse gate. Natalie saw him through the security monitor at 7:40 a.m., standing in a dark overcoat with rain dampening his hair. He looked less polished than usual. Not ruined, not yet, but sleepless around the eyes. A man discovering that money could buy doors but not always open them. Marcus appeared in the hall. He says he needs 5 minutes. Eleanor, on speaker from her office, said, Absolutely not. Natalie watched Victor press the intercom again. There was a time she would have answered before he had to ask twice. That memory made her angry at herself, then sad for the woman who had called endurance love. Let him into the front parlor, she said. Record everything. Eleanor sighed. Natalie. 5 minutes. With Marcus in the room. Victor entered smelling of cold rain and expensive cologne. His eyes went first to her belly, and for one fragile second Natalie hoped he might ask about the baby. He did not. You need to call off the review, he said. Hope died cleanly. Natalie sat in an armchair with a pillow at her back. She had learned the previous night that standing too long made her ankles swell. Victor noticed the pillow and looked away as if her pregnancy inconvenienced his anger. No, she said. You're going to destroy Hale Group. The review is designed to prevent that. Do not use that boardroom voice with me. It is the only voice you respond to. His mouth twisted. You enjoyed it. Sitting there while everyone looked at me like a criminal. You presented a coerced separation agreement to your pregnant wife after changing the locks on a house you did not own. I was furious because you lied about who you were. You were furious because the woman you underestimated had records. Victor paced once to the window. Marcus stood near the door, silent and inconvenient. We can fix this, Victor said. He turned back, softening his face with visible effort. Natalie, we are having a child. We should not be at war. The word child in his mouth made her body go still. Then say it, she said. Say what? Say you did not tell Marissa you questioned whether the baby was yours. Victor's face changed by half an inch. Enough. Natalie felt something inside her close, not violently but with final precision. You did, she said. I was angry. You were preparing a defense. I never would have used it. You already used it. You put doubt in another woman's mouth before your daughter took her first breath. Victor blinked. Daughter? The question escaped him before strategy could stop it. Natalie stared. They had not told anyone the baby's sex. She had found out at the appointment the afternoon he packed her suitcase. She had planned to tell him over dinner, before she discovered dinner had been replaced by exile. For the first time, grief broke through her composure. Yes, she said. A daughter. Victor's expression flickered. Shock. Calculation. Maybe a thin blade of regret. Natalie? No. He stepped toward her. Marcus moved. Victor stopped, anger returning because grief gave him no advantage. You cannot cut me out of my child's life. I am not trying to, but you will not use her to reach me, my assets, or my decisions. You think a custody court will like this? A billionaire heiress hiding behind security while alienating a father? There he was again, rehearsing headlines. Natalie's sadness hardened into clarity. Custody courts also read messages, she said. They read medical timelines. They read threats. They read financial records. Most importantly, they read patterns. Victor leaned close enough that Marcus shifted again. Be careful, Natalie. People hate women like you. Women with money? Women who pretend to be victims while holding all the power. She looked at him then, really looked. The man before her was not a stranger. That was the terrible part. He was an extension of every small dismissal she had forgiven. Every joke about her old clothes. Every complaint that her caution made him feel judged. Every time he had called her calmness cold, because it resisted his version of events. Power, she said quietly, is not the same as safety. Last week I was living with a husband who could smile at me over breakfast and plan to remove me by dinner. Yesterday I learned he told another woman our child might not be his. I have resources, Victor. That is why you failed. But do not confuse your failure with my protection. For once, he had no immediate answer. Natalie stood slowly. Your 5 minutes are over. Victor's eyes dropped to her belly again. I want to be told when she is born. Through counsel. The words hit him harder than she expected. Maybe because they were not angry. They were administrative. He had been moved from husband to case file. Marcus opened the door. Victor paused at the threshold. You will regret humiliating me. Natalie sat back down, exhausted but steady. No, she said. I regret trusting you. The humiliating was not supposed to be dramatic. It was a preliminary injunction proceeding in a commercial court, scheduled to address preservation of Hale Group settlement funds and access to records. The courtroom had beige walls, practical lighting, and the stale hush of expensive disputes. Still, by 9 a.m, every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back. Hale employees sat together in tense clusters. Marissa arrived in a dark suit with no diamonds, flanked by her own attorney. Victor entered last, wearing the careful sorrow of a man coached to appear wounded but not weak. Natalie arrived through a side entrance with Eleanor. She wore navy, flat shoes, and no visible sign of wealth beyond the quality of the coat that draped around her shoulders. Her pregnancy could no longer be hidden. The courtroom saw it before they saw her face. The whispering changed. Victor saw it too. His jaw flexed. The judge, Honorable Miriam Sloane, had a reputation for disliking theater. That was why Eleanor wanted this courtroom. Judge Sloane did not reward volume. She rewarded receipts. Peter Lang argued first. He described Northbridge's actions as disproportionate and personally motivated. He said Hale Group risked severe harm if settlement funds remained frozen. He referred to Natalie as Mr. Hale's estranged spouse more often than necessary, each time attempting to shrink her from creditor principal to angry wife. Judge Sloane let him speak for 12 minutes before asking, Counsel, did Mr. Hale disclose his marital conflict before attempting repayment of the Northbridge facility? Peter hesitated. The conflict was private. That was not my question. Natalie watched Victor's fingers tighten on the table. Peter adjusted. No, Your Honor. Did he disclose the expenses associated with Ms. Crane? They were categorized as business development. That also was not my question. The courtroom became very quiet. Peter said, No, Your Honor. Eleanor rose. Natalie had seen Eleanor dismantle billion-dollar claims in rooms where no one raised a voice. Still, watching her in court was different. She did not attack. She arranged facts so neatly that the opposing side appeared to have walked into a cage and locked it themselves. Your Honor, Eleanor said, this is not a case about a lender disliking a borrower. This is a case about a borrower accepting emergency financing under strict covenants, receiving a substantial settlement, and immediately attempting to remove oversight while concealing executive conduct that created material risk. She presented the timeline. Settlement confirmation. Domestic removal. Separation waiver. Lock change. Marissa expenses. Early repayment agenda. Each item was simple. Together, they formed a shape no apology could soften. Then Marissa's attorney stood. Victor turned sharply. Marissa did not look at him. Her attorney requested permission to submit preserved communications relevant to expense authorization and representations made by Mr. Hale. Judge Sloan allowed it. Peter objected. Judge Sloan overruled him before he finished. The messages appeared on the courtroom monitor. Victor to Marissa, let me handle accounting. You are worth it. Victor to Marissa, once settlement clears, Natalie signs and disappears. Then no one can question what I spend on my future. Victor to Marissa, if she fights, we raise doubts about the pregnancy and her hidden money. Public hates a lying heiress. The last message changed the air. Natalie's ears rang. She had known the substance. Seeing the words enlarged above a judge's bench was different. For 1 second, she was not a consortium steward or creditor principal. She was a mother reading a threat against a child who had not yet opened her eyes. Her hand moved to her belly. Across the room, Victor looked at the monitor as if someone else had written his private thoughts in his voice. Judge Sloan's face did not change, but her pen stopped moving. Peter whispered fiercely to Victor. Victor shook his head once, his composure cracking. That is taken out of context. Judge Sloan looked over her glasses. Mr. Hale, you will not speak from counsel table unless instructed. He sat back, flushed. Eleanor did not gloat. She simply said, Your Honor, we request continued preservation of settlement funds, expedited forensic review, and an order preventing destruction or alteration of corporate communications. Judge Sloan granted nearly everything. Not because Natalie was wounded, because Victor had been foolish enough to document the wound as strategy. When the hearing ended, reporters surged toward the hallway. Marcus formed a path. Natalie moved slowly, aware of cameras, aware of whispers, aware of Victor behind her. Natalie. His voice followed her. She stopped despite Eleanor's warning glance. Victor stood a few feet away, pale with anger and something like fear. You let her submit private messages. Natalie looked at Marissa, who stood near the wall trembling but upright. No, Natalie said. You wrote them. You are turning everyone against me. You keep confusing exposure with betrayal. A reporter lifted a phone. Eleanor stepped forward, but Natalie raised one hand. She would not give a speech. Speeches fed headlines. But some sentences deserved witnesses. You tried to make my daughter a rumor before she was born, Natalie said. Remember that when you wonder why the door closed. Victor's face emptied. Natalie walked away. Outside, courthouse steps gleamed after another morning of rain. She paused at the top, breathing carefully while cameras clicked. The baby moved beneath her coat, a small insistent roll. Natalie looked down and whispered, anything except Victor's pride. Hale Group's settlement funds moved into escrow. The independent committee hired forensic accountants. Victor's access badge was deactivated so discreetly that he learned of it only when the elevator refused to rise above the lobby. Someone recorded him shouting at building security. By nightfall, the clip had reached every investor who once praised his control. Natalie did not watch it. She had more important work. The consortium team gathered in the townhouse dining room, where old portraits looked down on laptops, annotated contracts, and half-empty cups of coffee. Eleanor led the legal strategy. Claudia Reyes joined by encrypted video from Hale Tower. A restructuring advisor named Jonah Pierce presented options for protecting the company's operating divisions without rewarding Victor. If we force a sale under pressure, Jonah said, Predatory buyers will cut staff and strip the medical systems unit. Short-term recovery, long-term damage. Natalie looked at the chart. The medical systems unit served rural hospitals. One of those hospitals had treated her grandmother after a stroke. Another had delivered babies in a county where no other maternity ward remained open. Victor would accuse her of sentiment if he were in the room. He had never understood that sentiment and strategy were not enemies when both were disciplined. No fire sale, Natalie said. Stabilize the divisions. Remove executive contamination. Offer bridge support tied to governance reform and employee protections. Jonah nodded. That means you are effectively rescuing his company again. No, Natalie said. I am rescuing the parts he used as cover. Eleanor made a note. Claudia's face on screen showed fatigue and relief. The board can support that if Victor is formally suspended and later removed for cause. Can you get the votes? After court? Yes. The practical conversation steadied Natalie. Betrayal had made the world feel slippery. Numbers, covenants, and board procedures gave it edges again. At 10, the meeting paused. Dana insisted Natalie eat. The others pretended not to notice when the nurse put a plate directly in front of her, like a commandment. Eleanor waited until Natalie had taken 3 bites before saying, "Your mother called." Natalie froze. Of all the battles ahead, that one had the oldest roots. Helena Vale lived mostly in Geneva and spoke in polished sentences that could praise and punish in the same breath. She had warned Natalie against marrying Victor. Not because he lacked pedigree, as tabloids would have assumed, but because he performed humility the way some men performed charity, best when watched. Natalie had defended him then. Love makes advocates of people who should be witnesses. What did she say? Natalie asked. She is flying in. Of course she is. Eleanor's mouth softened. She asked if you were safe. Natalie looked down at her plate. And after that? She asked whether you wanted her to bring the old blue nursery quilt. That undid Natalie more than the court messages. She put down her fork, pressing 2 fingers beneath her eyes. Her mother was difficult, proud, and often cold in the way women become when generations have punished them for warmth. But the blue nursery quilt had belonged to Natalie's father, then Natalie, and now perhaps to her daughter. Eleanor tactfully studied her notes. Natalie recovered after a moment. Tell her yes. At 11:30, a new email arrived from Victor's counsel proposing confidential settlement discussions. The offer was insulting in its confidence. Victor would resign, receive a consulting agreement, and agree not to contest custody if Natalie released personal claims and withdrew any support for criminal referral related to expenses. Eleanor read it aloud with increasing dryness. Jonah said, "He wants a golden parachute wrapped in a parenting threat." "He wants time," Natalie said. "For what?" She considered the question. Victor had lost access to company accounts. His public image was cracking. Marissa had turned over messages. The board was moving. What did men like him do when control failed? They found a stage. Check tomorrow's calendar, she said. Eleanor searched. Hale Group Annual Leadership Summit. It was supposed to open tomorrow evening at the Meridian Hotel. Natalie leaned back. Can he still attend? Claudia answered from the screen. Technically yes, unless the board bars him. The summit includes employees, vendors, press, and regional partners. There it was. Victor would not win in court. He would try to win the story in public. He would stand before employees and cast himself as the founder under attack by hidden wealth. He would use their fear as a shield. Natalie felt the baby press beneath her palm. Do not bar him, she said. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Natalie, if he wants a stage, let him step onto one with lights. Claudia looked wary. That could be risky. So is letting him rehearse persecution for 6 months. Eleanor studied her. What are you planning? Natalie looked at the summit agenda. Victor's keynote title was still listed, Building What Lasts. The irony was almost generous. A correction, she said. And by 7 on Thursday evening it held more fear than celebration. Hale Group employees stood in clusters beneath chandeliers, speaking in low voices. Vendors watched the entrances. Reporters pretended to admire the floral arrangements while checking their phones. The company banner still showed Victor's profile beside the words Building What Lasts, though someone had quietly removed his title from the program. Victor arrived to a scatter of uncertain applause. He wore black tie and a wounded expression. Marissa was not with him. That absence was strategic, but the room noticed anyway. So did Natalie, watching from a private room above the ballroom with Eleanor, Claudia, and Marcus. On the monitor, Victor moved through the crowd shaking hands. He paused longer with employees, touching shoulders, lowering his head as if receiving condolences. He was good at this. Natalie had loved that once, his ability to make people feel personally seen. Now she understood, he also measured them while smiling. Claudia crossed her arms. He changed the keynote title. The screen zoomed to the podium card. Truth, loyalty, and the future of Hale. Eleanor made a sound of disgust. Subtle. Natalie stood carefully. The black dress she wore skimmed her belly. Over it, she had placed a cream coat with a high collar, not armor exactly, but close enough. Her mother's plane had landed an hour earlier, and Helena was already downstairs in the ballroom, seated near the front like a blade wrapped in pearls. Ready? Eleanor asked. Natalie looked at the monitor. Victor had reached the stage. Not ready, she said. But clear. Victor began with gratitude. He thanked employees for their loyalty, partners for their patience, and families for their sacrifice. He spoke about building from nothing, about storms, about the danger of outsiders who did not understand the soul of a company. He did not name Natalie at first. He let the shape of accusation form before giving it a target. Many of you have read stories this week, he said. Stories about my family, my marriage, my company. I will not dignify every distortion, but I will say this. Hale Group was not built by inherited money hiding in the shadows. The room shifted. Natalie watched employees look at one another. Some were moved. Some were embarrassed. Some were angry because fear needed somewhere to go, and Victor was offering them a direction. This company was built by work, he continued. By late nights, missed birthdays, risk, and loyalty. No private fortune can understand that. Helena Vale, visible in the front row, lifted one eyebrow. Victor saw her, but did not recognize her. That was his mistake. He recognized logos, not lineages. So tonight, Victor said, voice rising, I ask the board and our partners to reject intimidation. I ask them not to let one person's private revenge threaten thousands of jobs. That was the cue. Claudia walked onto the stage from the left. Victor's smile froze. Claudia? She took the second microphone. Thank you, Victor. Since you have raised governance matters in front of employees and partners, the board will provide a brief factual update. The ballroom went silent. Victor leaned close, still smiling for the crowd. Do not do this. The microphone caught it. Every speaker in the ballroom carried the whisper. Natalie closed her eyes for half a second. Even now, he forgot the room could hear him. Claudia turned to the audience. Hale Group's board has formed an independent committee. Settlement proceeds remain preserved by court order. Mr. Hale is on administrative leave pending review. Operations will continue. Payroll is protected. Vendor obligations will be prioritized. No employee should accept rumors that lawful oversight equals abandonment. Relief moved through parts of the room. Victor reached for the microphone. Claudia stepped back. Then the central screen behind them changed. Not to scandal. Not to private messages. Natalie had refused that. Employees did not need a spectacle of marital cruelty to understand corporate risk. The screen showed a restructuring guarantee. Vale Ellison Consortium commits up to $1.2 billion in stabilized financing for Hale Group operating divisions, conditional on independent governance, employee retention protections, and removal of conflicted executive authority. The ballroom inhaled. Victor turned toward the screen as if it had struck him. From the audience, a reporter whispered, $1.2 billion? Claudia continued. This commitment protects the company's mission while review proceeds. It does not protect misconduct. Only then did Natalie enter. She came through the side aisle, not from backstage. Cameras swung toward her. Conversations died in layers. She passed employees who had seen her at holiday parties carrying trays, speaking softly to spouses, leaving before speeches. Many had never known her last name was not a footnote to Victor's. Victor watched her approach with fury breaking through his stage face. Natalie climbed the steps slowly. Claudia offered an arm. Natalie accepted it, because pride was useless if it made a pregnant woman fall. At the podium, she did not look at Victor first. She looked at the employees. I will be brief, she said. Her voice was not loud, but the microphone carried it cleanly. Hale Group's work matters. The clinics that receive your systems matter. The patients who never know your names matter. Your jobs should not be held hostage by one man's private choices, including choices made against me. Victor's lips tightened. Natalie turned slightly, enough to include him without giving him the center. I did not come here to ask you to hate Victor Hale. Hate is unstable. It burns too hot and teaches too little. I came here to say the company will not be destroyed to preserve his pride. The sentence landed harder than any insult. In the front row, Helena Vale watched her daughter with an expression Natalie could not read. Perhaps pride. Perhaps sorrow. Perhaps both, as mothers often carry them braided together. Victor stepped toward the microphone. And what about our family, Natalie? Will you tell them you hid $36 billion from your husband? There it was, flung like meat to a crowd. Natalie faced him fully. I hid nothing that entitled you to cruelty. The room fell into a silence, so complete the chandeliers seemed to hum. Victor's face flushed. You let me struggle. I saved your company through a fund you respected only because you did not know it was connected to your wife. You deceived me. You underestimated me. Those are different sins. Someone in the audience gasped softly. Someone else began to clap, then stopped, unsure. Natalie looked back at the crowd. The review will continue. Employees will receive direct updates. Vendors will be contacted by tomorrow morning. No one in this room should have to choose between truth and a paycheck. She stepped away from the podium. Victor remained under the lights, but the stage no longer belonged to him. That was the reversal he could not survive. Not because he had been shouted down, but because he had been outgrown. Victor stopped pretending. His lawyers sent aggressive letters. His media allies floated stories about secret heiresses and weaponized maternity. A retired executive gave an anonymous quote claiming Natalie had always seemed cold. Someone leaked that she had refused to take Victor's calls, as if refusing emotional ambush were a crime. The attacks might have worked if Victor had not already shown the world his hand. Employees began sending statements to the independent committee. Assistants described altered expense descriptions. Finance managers produced emails they had quietly saved. A driver confirmed trips to Marissa's penthouse during work hours. A receptionist remembered Natalie arriving at Hale Tower with homemade cookies for a staff fundraiser, while Victor was upstairs arguing that his wife lacked business instincts. Small memories gathered. They mattered because downfall is rarely one dramatic secret. More often, it is 1,000 people finally admitting what they noticed. Natalie spent the next week moving between legal calls, medical appointments, and meetings about the stabilization plan. Her mother stayed in the townhouse guest room and filled the nursery with quiet efficiency. The old blue quilt arrived in tissue paper. So did a silver rattle, 3 boxes of books, and a handwritten note from Helena that read, "You were never foolish for loving. Only human. Now be human and protected." Natalie read it twice, then placed it in the nursery drawer. One evening, she found Helena standing in the half-finished nursery, looking at the crib. "You should sit," Helena said without turning. "Everyone keeps saying that. Everyone is correct." Natalie sat in the rocking chair. Her back hurt. Her feet hurt. Her heart hurt in a less dramatic but more persistent way. Helena adjusted the quilt over the crib rail. "I owe you an apology." Natalie looked up, startled. Helena Vale apologized about as often as eclipses repeated on command. "For what?" "I warned you about Victor as if intelligence should have saved you from pain. That was unfair. Intelligence does not make a woman immune to hope." The words entered quietly and stayed. Natalie looked at her hands. "I thought if I kept the money out of the marriage, I would know what was real." "And did you?" "For a while I thought so." Helena came to stand beside the chair. Her face was composed, but her eyes were tired. "Money reveals. Lack of money reveals. Power reveals. So does inconvenience. You were pregnant and inconvenient to his next ambition. That revealed him." Natalie swallowed. Downstairs, Eleanor's voice carried faintly from a call. Life continued arranging itself around emergency. "I still feel ashamed," Natalie admitted. "Because he betrayed you? Because I let him close enough to do it." Helena's expression sharpened with maternal anger. "Do not confuse being loving with being careless. He is responsible for what he did with your trust." Natalie closed her eyes. Her mother's hand settled awkwardly on her shoulder, as if affection were a language learned late, but still worth speaking. "Your daughter will need that lesson," Helena said. "So learn it before she asks." The baby kicked then, strong and sudden. Helena's hand jerked in surprise. For the first time in days, Natalie laughed fully. Helena stared at her daughter's belly with offended wonder. Assertive. She has opinions. Good. The moment did not heal everything. Nothing honest heals everything at once. But it placed one warm stone in the cold river Natalie had been crossing. The next morning, the independent committee delivered its interim findings to the board. Victor had misclassified over $9 million in expenses. He had directed staff to prepare a separation agreement that attempted to waive claims tied to funds he knew were under covenant restrictions. He had failed to disclose a personal relationship with Marissa while routing benefits connected to her through business categories. He had discussed public strategies to undermine Natalie's credibility and her child's legitimacy. The board voted to remove him as CEO for cause. Victor received the news in his lawyer's office. Natalie received it at her obstetrician's office while listening to her daughter's heartbeat. Eleanor texted only one sentence. "It is done." Natalie looked at the monitor where the baby's profile floated in gray and white. Tiny nose. Tiny hand near her face. A life still forming, already surrounded by contracts and storms and women determined she would not inherit silence as a family tradition. "Good," Natalie whispered. The technician smiled, thinking she meant the heartbeat. Natalie did. She also 12 Victor's removal should have sobered him. Instead, it made him reckless. 2 days after the board vote, he filed a petition seeking emergency access to marital assets, claiming Natalie had used hidden wealth to financially isolate him over the unborn child, arguing that Natalie was likely to flee the jurisdiction. Eleanor read the filing in silence. Then she removed her glasses and pinched the bridge of her nose. "He is claiming you are a flight risk because your mother owns aircraft." Natalie, who had slept 3 hours, stared at her tea. "Technically the consortium owns aircraft. Please do not help him." The filing was absurd in places, dangerous in others. Victor asked the court to prevent Natalie from making unilateral decisions affecting the child's financial identity, a phrase Eleanor translated as he wants access to trust planning. He accused her of reputational sabotage while attaching articles generated by his own public statements. He described Marissa as a former consultant whose relevance had been exaggerated. Marissa's attorney responded within hours with preserved messages and a statement that Ms. Crane would not participate in any false narrative minimizing Mr. Hale's representations to her. Natalie read that line twice. Marissa was not redeemed, but she was no longer useful to Victor. Sometimes that was enough to make a person tell the truth. Family court moved the emergency hearing to Friday. The courtroom was smaller than commercial court, less crowded, more intimate in a way Natalie disliked. Matters of children should have felt protected, but the room held too many strangers with folders full of private pain. Victor arrived with a new legal team and a softer suit. He had shaved carefully. He carried no visible anger, only wounded fatherhood. It was his best performance yet. When he saw Natalie, his expression shifted into concern. She almost admired the discipline of it. The judge, a practical man named Robert Klein, began by reminding both parties that the child was not yet born and the court would not entertain theatrics. Victor's attorney stood. She argued that Natalie had concealed extraordinary wealth, initiated public actions that destabilized Victor's employment, and surrounded herself with security that limited communication. She described Victor as eager to co-parent and devastated by exclusion from medical updates. Judge Klein looked at Natalie. "Mrs. Vale, has Mr. Hale been informed of major medical developments?" Eleanor rose. "Through counsel, Your Honor. Given documented threats to challenge the child's legitimacy for strategic reasons, direct communication has been limited." Victor lowered his head, the image of a wounded man enduring slander. Eleanor submitted the message from the courtroom monitor in the commercial hearing. "If she fights, we raise doubts about the pregnancy and her hidden money. Public hates a lying heiress." Judge Klein read it once, then again. Victor's performance thinned. His attorney said quickly, "Your Honor, that message was sent in anger during a marital breakdown." Judge Klein looked over the page. "Was the child also conceived in anger, counsel? Because the message concerns a child." No one answered. Natalie felt the baby move and placed both hands over her belly. She did not want to cry in court. She did not want Victor to see tears and convert them into leverage. But the room blurred briefly anyway. Then Judge Klein asked Victor directly, "Mr. Hale, do you dispute sending this message?" Victor stood. "No, Your Honor, but I was under extreme distress after discovering my wife had concealed a fortune and had influence over my company." "So your response was to threaten doubt over paternity?" "I did not intend to follow through." Judge Klein's face remained neutral. "Intent is comforting to the person who caused harm. Less so to the person harmed." Victor flushed. The judge continued, "At this stage, the court will not issue orders giving either party control over unborn child trust planning. That request is premature and, frankly, troubling." Medical updates will be provided through counsel unless Mrs. Vale consents otherwise. Mr. Hale is restrained from public statements questioning paternity or disparaging the child's legitimacy. Any violation will affect future custody considerations. Victor's jaw worked. His attorney touched his sleeve, warning him not to speak. For once, he listened. After the hearing, Natalie waited in a side corridor while Eleanor handled paperwork. The hallway smelled of old carpet and coffee. She leaned against the wall, suddenly drained. Victor approached despite Marcus stepping into view. "I didn't want the baby," he said. The sentence was not enough. It was also not nothing. Natalie studied him. Without the stage, he looked smaller. Still handsome, still dangerous, but less inevitable. "Wanting is not parenting," she said. His eyes reddened, whether from anger or grief she could not tell. "Do you plan to erase me?" "No. I plan to require you to become someone who cannot erase others." He looked away. "That may take a while," she added. For a second, something like a bitter laugh moved through him. "You always did know where to cut." "No," Natalie said. "I learned from where you struck." Marcus escorted her to the car. On the drive home, Natalie watched the city pass in strips of gray stone and winter light. She did not feel victorious. She felt protective. Chapter 13, the new structure of Hale Group, was announced 3-week restriction pending final review. The medical systems and rural infrastructure units would receive stabilization, funding through a Vale Ellison facility with strict oversight. Claudia Reyes would serve as interim chair. Jonah Pierce would lead restructuring. Employees would keep benefits through the transition. Executive perks would be reviewed, trimmed, and in several humiliating cases, eliminated. The announcement did not mention Natalie's marriage. That was deliberate. The work was bigger than Victor, and Natalie refused to make every rescued paycheck a footnote to his affair. Still, the public understood enough. Headlines wrote themselves. Pregnant heiress saves company after husband's ouster. Hale Group founder removed after mistress expense scandal. The $36 billion wife Victor Hale never saw coming. Natalie hated the last one least, though Eleanor said that was because it sounded like a bad movie and bad movies at least knew they were fiction. Marissa disappeared from the city for a while. Through her attorney, she returned jewelry purchased with company funds and provided testimony to the review. She also sent Natalie one handwritten note. "I cannot undo what I participated in. I can only stop lying for him. I am sorry for the scarf." Natalie kept the note in the legal file, not the memory box. Apologies had places. Not all of them were intimate. Victor moved into an apartment owned by a friend and began consulting with a reputation firm. His first attempt at a comeback interview was canceled after the interviewer insisted on asking about the paternity message. His second attempt never aired because the board's final report was released the same morning. The final report was worse than the interim one. It found not only expense misconduct, but a pattern of pressure on subordinates, retaliatory reassignment, and misrepresentation to lenders. It did not recommend criminal charges directly, but it referred certain findings to appropriate authorities. That phrase, cold and bureaucratic, followed Victor like a shadow. Natalie read the report in the nursery at midnight, because sleep had become theoretical. The baby's due date was 3 weeks away. The nursery smelled faintly of lavender and new wood. On the shelf sat books Helena had selected with aggressive literary standards. On the dresser lay folded cotton clothes, so small they made Natalie emotional in ways billion-dollar negotiations did not. She stopped reading at a paragraph describing Victor's instruction to staff. "And will not fight if we make it embarrassing. And not Natalie. Not wife. Not mother of his child. A letter to be managed." She closed the report. There would always be people who mistook gentleness for a lack of teeth. The lesson was not to become cruel first. The lesson was to keep one's teeth and still choose carefully when to show them. Her phone rang softly. "Victor." She considered ignoring it. Then she saw the time and answered through the recorded line. "Is something wrong?" she asked. His voice was hoarse. "I read the report." "So did I. Some of it looks worse than it was." Natalie said nothing. He exhaled. Most of it was exactly what it was. That was new. She waited. "I am not calling to fight," he said. "My lawyer told me not to call at all." "Your lawyer is improving." A faint broken sound came through, almost a laugh, almost not. "I found the sonogram picture," Victor said. "The one from the appointment that day. It was in the side pocket of the suitcase." Natalie closed her eyes. She had wondered where it went. "I did not know," he said. "You chose not to know." "Yes." The word sat between them, small but real. Victor continued. I keep thinking about the foyer. You standing there. I thought you would cry and sign. That is what I thought of my wife. Natalie looked at the crib. Why are you telling me this? Because for the first time, I do not know how to make it sound better. She had no answer for that. Maybe there was no answer. He said, I want to be told when she comes. Through counsel if that is all you allow. But I want to know. I will not challenge paternity. I told my lawyers to put it in writing. Natalie's throat tightened despite herself. That is the minimum, she said. I know. Did he? She did not know. But the sentence did not reach for sympathy, and that made it more tolerable. Good night, Victor. Natalie? She paused. Is she healthy? At last, the question. Late. Insufficient. But aimed at the child rather than the fortune. Natalie rested a hand over her belly. Yes. Victor breathed out. Good, he said, and then very quietly, thank you. The call ended. Natalie sat in the nursery silence for a long time afterward. Forgiveness did not arrive. Neither did rage. Only her, and still human in another. That did not restore trust. It only made the truth less simple. Her daughter would need the less simple truth one day. Not yet. For now, she needed warmth, milk, safety, and a mother who had finally stopped apologizing for surviving with. And during a board update, Jonah was explaining vendor continuity when Natalie felt the first unmistakable contraction wrap around her spine and tighten across her abdomen like a hand closing. She stopped mid-note, placed her pen down, and stared at the screen. Eleanor, who had developed an alarming ability to read Natalie's breathing, said, How far apart? Do not start. That was not an answer. Helena appeared in the doorway, already holding Natalie's hospital bag. 7 minutes. I have been timing. Natalie looked at her mother. You have been timing my contractions without telling me? You were busy. Jonah's face on the screen went pale. Should we adjourn? Yes, Eleanor said. No, Natalie said. Everyone ignored her. The ride to the hospital was not cinematic. There was traffic. Natalie cursed once with such precision that Marcus, driving, pretended sudden interest in the windshield. Helena sat beside her in the back, one hand offered but not forced. Natalie took it during the third contraction and nearly crushed her mother's fingers. Good grip, Helena said tightly. Do not make this a leadership metaphor. I would not dare. At the hospital, privacy protocols unfolded around her. Dana was already there. Eleanor notified Victor's counsel that labor had begun, as agreed. Natalie focused on one step, then another, then the impossible arithmetic of pain and time. Hours narrowed her world to breath, instruction, pressure, and the fierce animal knowledge that her body was no longer an object in anyone else's story. It was a gate. It was work. It was hers. At 2:18 a.m., her daughter was born. The baby entered the world with a furious cry and a full head of dark hair. The doctor placed her on Natalie's chest, warm and slippery and astonishingly real. For a moment, every legal document, headline, betrayal, and board vote fell away. There was only the weight of a new life and the wild rearrangement of love. Natalie cried without restraint. Helena cried too, though she later denied it with aristocratic commitment. Hello, Grace, Natalie whispered. She had chosen the name the night after court. Not because grace meant softness, but because true grace was not passive. It was the strength to remain whole, without becoming what hurt you. Grace Vale Hale blinked at the world as if unimpressed by its previous management. Eleanor arrived at dawn with coffee she was not allowed to bring into the room, and flowers she pretended someone else had selected. Victor's written acknowledgement had come through counsel at 3:04 a.m. No paternity challenge. No media statement. Request for a photograph if and when Natalie consented. Natalie read the message while Grace slept against her. Helena watched from the window. You do not have to. I know. She looked at her daughter's face. Grace had Victor's mouth. That hurt. Then Grace yawned with such offended drama that Natalie laughed, and the hurt loosened enough to breathe around it. One photograph, Natalie said. No posting. No forwarding beyond counsel. He can see that she is here. Eleanor minutes later. She is beautiful. Thank you. I am sorry. Natalie did not answer. An apology sent to a hospital room could be true and still too small for the damage. She let it remain unanswered because not every sentence deserved immediate care. 2 days later, she took Grace home to the townhouse. The nursery waited with the blue quilt folded over the chair, not in the crib because Helena had read modern sleep guidelines with the intensity of a hostile takeover. Flowers filled the hall. Staff moved softly. Outside, reporters lingered, but Marcus kept them behind the gates. The world wanted the image of the billionaire mother bringing home the heir after scandal. Natalie wanted a shower and 6 hours of sleep. Grace wanted milk and expressed that smaller and larger at once. In the weeks that followed, Natalie attended meetings in 10-minute bursts between feedings. She approved the final stabilization facility, while Grace slept in a bassinet beside the desk. She signed trust documents that protected her daughter's future without turning her into a prize. She reviewed custody proposals that allowed Victor supervised visits at first, with a path toward more if he complied with therapy, parenting education, and non-disparagement orders. Eleanor called the terms firm. Helena called them generous. Natalie called them necessary. Victor met Grace for the first time in a quiet family center with a social worker present. Natalie watched through a one-way window. He entered looking older. Not ruined in the satisfying way people imagine, but stripped of performance. When the social worker placed Grace in his arms, his face broke. He did not look toward the window. He did not make the moment about being watched. He whispered something Natalie could not hear. Grace slept through it. Natalie cried then too, silently, where no one could use it. Love for a child does not erase what a man did to the child's mother. But if it becomes real, it can become one reason he stops doing harm. Natalie did not trust that possibility yet. She simply allowed it to exist under supervision. That was her. Hale Group no longer looked like Victor's monument. The sign on the tower remained, but the company beneath it had changed. Claudia became permanent chair. Jonah completed the restructuring without mass layoffs. The Rural Hospital Systems unit expanded under the Vale facility, and won a public health contract Victor had once dismissed as too modest. Employees received retention bonuses funded partly by clawed-back executive perks. The company was not perfect. No company was. But it was no longer arranged around one man's appetite. Victor settled most civil claims. He surrendered voting control expenses and agreed to a 5-year bar from executive roles in companies receiving Vale Ellison financing. Authorities continued reviewing certain referrals, which meant his future remained uncertain in a way money could not immediately repair. Marissa relocated to Boston and, according to her attorney, began working for an actual communications firm where invoices meant what they said. Natalie wished her no harm and no closeness. Briar House was restored room by room. Natalie did not move back immediately. For months, she could not think of the foyer without hearing Victor's voice telling her to be grateful. Then one spring morning, she carried Grace through the front door while sunlight poured across the marble, and the house felt different. Not innocent. Reclaimed. The emerald scarf, cleaned and folded, rested in a drawer in Natalie's dressing room. She did not wear it. Perhaps Grace would one day if she wanted. Perhaps not. Inherited things should be invitations, not chains. On the anniversary of the night Victor tried to exile her, Natalie hosted a small dinner at Briar House. Not a gala. Not revenge theater. Just Helena, Eleanor, Dana, Marcus, Claudia, Jonah, and a few friends who had loved her quietly before the world learned her name. Grace sat in a high chair wearing a bib decorated with tiny lemons. She banged a spoon against the tray whenever conversation became too serious. She has your boardroom style, Claudia said. Efficient? Natalie asked. Terrifying. Helena looked pleased. After dinner, Natalie stepped into the foyer alone. The chandelier glowed above her. Rain tapped softly at the glass doors, just as it had that night. For a moment memory overlaid the present. Victor with the check, Marissa with the scarf, the suitcase at Natalie's feet, the baby moving beneath her palm. She waited for pain. It came, but changed. Less like a blade, more like a scar under weather. Behind her, Grace laughed in the dining room. The sound moved through the house and altered it. Natalie understood then that survival was not the same as returning to who she had been before. That woman had loved with hope and hidden with fear. The woman standing in the foyer now loved with boundaries and protected without apology. She was not harder in the way Victor had predicted. She was clearer. Her phone buzzed with a message from Victor. Grace's pediatric update had gone through the parenting app that morning. He had responded, "Thank you. She looks happy." Natalie considered the words. They contained no demand, no performance, no hook hidden beneath concern. Progress, perhaps, or simply restraint. She no longer needed to decide quickly. She typed back, "She is." That was all. In another life, she might have written more. In this one, she had learned the mercy of enough. Eleanor appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of tea. You vanished. Just thinking. Dangerous habit. Natalie accepted a cup. It saved me. Eleanor looked around the foyer. No. You saved you. The habit helped. They stood together in companionable silence. At last Eleanor said, Do you ever regret not burning him completely? Natalie watched rain trace silver lines down the glass. Some days, she admitted. Then I remember Grace will grow up asking who we became after we were hurt. I want an answer that does not depend on destruction. Very noble. Very annoying. Eleanor smiled. Natalie looked back toward the dining room, where Grace had begun conducting the adults with her spoon. A $36 billion fortune could buy privacy, lawyers, houses, aircraft, and entire futures rearranged on paper. It could not buy the moment a child laughed in a room, once used to humiliate her mother. It could only protect the path toward that moment. Victor had thought $74 million gave him permission to discard her. He never understood that money was never Natalie's greatest asset. Her greatest asset was the part of her he mistook for weakness. The patience to watch, the discipline to wait, and the courage to leave the door with her head high before returning to change the locks herself. That night, after everyone left and Grace slept beneath the careful glow of the nursery lamp, Natalie stood beside the crib and touched the blue quilt folded over the chair. You will hear many stories about power, she whispered to her daughter. Some people will tell you power is loud. Some will tell you it is cruel. Some will tell you it belongs to whoever can take the most. Grace slept on, one tiny fist curled beside her cheek. Natalie smiled. They are wrong. Power is knowing what you can destroy and choosing what you should protect. Power is leaving before bitterness becomes your home. Power is refusing to let someone else's betrayal become the shape of your heart. Outside, the rain stopped. Morning would come with more work, more documents, more imperfect conversations, more life insisting on itself. Natalie was ready for all of it, not because she had never been broken, because she had learned that being broken open could reveal where the light had been waiting. She turned off the lamp, left the nursery door slightly open, and walked down the hall of the following summer. Natalie returned to Hale Tower for the first time without lawyers. The lobby had changed. Victor's portrait was gone, replaced by a wall of employee photographs from clinics, warehouses, call centers, and field installations. Grace slept against Natalie's shoulder in a pale cotton dress, one hand curled around the collar of her mother's jacket. The security guard at the desk smiled at the baby before remembering who Natalie was and straightening too quickly. Good morning, Mrs. Vale. Natalie smiled back. Good morning, Aaron. He looked startled that she remembered his name. She remembered many names. Quiet women often did. Upstairs, Claudia was hosting a small ceremony for the rural systems team. Their software had helped reopen 2 maternity units in counties that had almost lost them. No one mentioned Victor in the speeches. That absence felt less like erasure and more like recovery. The work had survived him, and survival had given it new ownership. Near the windows, Natalie saw a young analyst whisper to another employee while glancing her way. Years ago, that might have made her retreat. Now she simply adjusted Grace on her hip and walked over. Is there a question I can answer? She asked. The analyst blushed. Sorry. I was just saying I heard you saved the company. Natalie looked around the room. Engineers laughed beside nurses. A logistics manager hugged a hospital administrator. Claudia argued with Jonah over cake portions with the seriousness of a merger. No, Natalie said. A lot of people saved it. I only stopped one person from using it as a mirror. The analyst seemed to consider that. Then she nodded as if filing it somewhere useful. Later, when the ceremony ended, Natalie took Grace to the window. The city stretched below in bright steel and summer haze. Somewhere in that city, Victor was beginning again in a smaller way, under supervision, with fewer rooms available for his ego. He saw Grace twice a month now. He arrived on time. He did not bring cameras, gifts too expensive for a baby, or complaints disguised as concern. Natalie did not call that redemption. She called it compliance with the first requirements of decency. That was enough for the present. Grace woke and blinked at the skyline. Her tiny fingers opened against the glass, reaching for a world she did not yet know had already tried to bargain over her name. Natalie kissed her hair. You do not have to inherit my battles, she whispered. Only my courage. Behind her, the room filled with applause for people whose names would never trend online, but whose work would keep strangers alive. Natalie turned toward the sound, holding her daughter close. The best revenge, she realized, was not watching Victor fall forever. It was building a life so solid that his fall. Subscribe for more stories about quiet women, hidden power, and the moment betrayal meets consequence.